Welcome back to Rewind of the Living Dead. I'm Damon Martin.
And I'm Patrick the Clown.
I was actually going to say I'm Damon Leone. I'm his little brother, actually. I guess I'd be his big brother because I'm like twice Damien Leone's size. Yes, Patrick, it is finally time. One of the most anticipated horror films of the year. By the way, just to throw this out there, because the time of recording, we don't always record the podcast on the same night. We release it on the same night, but we don't always record it. We can happily say we are now talking about the number one film in America. How amazing is that?
It is very rare. In fact, I don't know that it's ever happened on this podcast, maybe once or twice, maybe Scream or something, that we're talking about the number one movie in America tonight. Not just the number one horror movie. The number one movie in America, as of this recording, is Terrifier 3, starring Elliot Fulham as Jonathan, David Howard Thornton as Art the Clown, and of course, everyone's favorite new Scream Queen, everyone's favorite new Final Girl, Lauren Lavera. Damon, we're talking about Terrifier 3, written and directed by Damien Leone. This little indie horror that is now atop the box office, has dethroned Joker, Folie Deux, which you and I both seen, and let's be honest, I don't think they were interested in the number one spot of the box office, the way they put that film together. That's a topic for another day. But the fact of the matter is that was a massive film with massive reach. And this little indie this really fringe horror movie that is Terrifier 3 is atop the box office. This isn't Scream 3. This isn't Halloween with Jamie Lee Curtis. This isn't a Friday the 13th reboot that is going to, blow the box office out of the water. This is a little indie, Damon, that through word of mouth and through a very rabid fan base has grown to become the number one movie in America. It's not a little thing. It's a big thing.
The last movie, as I mentioned in the intro, earned just a little over $17 million, or was it $15 million? $15 million on a $250,000 budget, which is a massive win for Terrifier 2. It was crowdfunded. Remember, that's how he made that movie. It was crowdfunded to make Terrifier 2, and it just blew up. And when you say $15 million, yeah, that doesn't sound like a lot of money compared to Deadpool and Wolverine, but for a movie that cost $250,000 to make, that's a massive win. For this movie to open at $18.3 million on an opening weekend, and again, I know that's, Smile 2 comes out soon. That's going to crush at the box office. I'm sure that's going to do, $30 million opening weekend. But that's a big studio picture. That's Paramount. That is a studio picture that had probably a $15-20 million budget. That's not really, that's what they hope to get on an opening for a movie like that. This movie, if I read correctly, had a $2 million budget. So they got a much bigger budget, 8 times as much as the last movie. But $2 million is still not a lot of money. To open at $18.3 million on opening weekend, and knowing that it's still not done, they're still going to get more money this month. They're hopefully not going to be Joker, Folie Deux, which blew donkey chunks and dropped off 85% between opening weekend and the second weekend. Art the Clown took a machete and just hacked Joaquin Phoenix into little pieces this weekend. And for a movie of this size and scope, I don't care if you don't love Terrifier. There's people out there, I've seen plenty of reviews, people who love it, and I've seen others who say it's just not for me. And that's okay. That's what film is supposed to be. It's not for everybody. But for a film of this size to come out and last time around surprised everybody by making any money at the box office, and then to come out for part 3 and get $18 million and become number one, that is an achievement almost beyond words for a film of this size to do this. It's unheard of.
Damon, it's not just unheard of. Okay, horror films have the original Friday the 13th was an indie film. It was small production, small budget, all that stuff. But relatively tame, honestly. It was just a basic slasher. Terrifier 3 is extreme horror. It's fun. It's actually a fun movie. There's a lot of laughs in it too. But when Art the Clown starts to killing, it looks nasty. It's fucking brutal. It's fucking gory. It's fucking super hardcore. movies like this, and I said this, I think, on one of our previous podcasts, movies like this used to be just for literally the hardcore fan base who knew about it, who had a tape of a tape, and they were like, oh, you want to see this recording? I recorded off my cousin's Terrifier 2. And like, it's like, oh my God, it's so crazy. He ripped her face off and smashed mashed potatoes into it. Like, it's one of these extreme horrors, and it's right atop the box office. It is the number one movie in the country. This is not any old win. Like you said, Smile, that's a big studio movie with studio budget, studio push. I don't remember seeing like a TV trailer for Terrifier 3. Maybe you have, maybe others have. I don't remember seeing billboards for it. I haven't been in LA in a couple of weeks. Maybe there's one up there for it. But I doubt it's like even a quarter or an eighth of the budget of something like Smile 2 is getting in terms of like actual promotion. But the word is out. Art the Clown is here to stay.
And also, the one thing I want to point out about you talking about scope, if I remember correctly, reading this on the box office report, I think Terrifier 3 opened on right around like 2,100 screens, and Joker 2 was on still this weekend on about 4,400 screens. So they had half of what Joker's like output did, meaning Joker was everywhere. Like, you could go to your local theater, your big theater, your Cineplex, your mom and pop theater, everyone was showing Joker 2. Not everyone showed Terrifier 3. Like, that's a huge drop from 4,400 screens to 2,100 screens, and you still got 18.3 million, and you still crushed every other film this weekend. Again, I'm not saying you have to love Terrifier. I'm saying you have to love the story of Terrifier. The fact that this is, as you said, this is an unrated horror film. There's no rating on this because it's so hardcore. This is not rated. This is not a film that should be doing what it's doing. By any standard metric of the movie business, this movie should not be doing what it's doing. Credit to Damien Leone, credit to the horror community for stepping up and making this a word of mouth success unlike anything I can remember seeing. I mean, the last time I remember, and this is going back years, last time as a horror fan, I remember people being like, you have to go see this. It's one of the most revolutionary horror films of all time. You got it. That was Scream. Yeah. In '96, and I was a teenager. You know what I mean? Like, that was, and I was like, and of course, that was a studio picture, and Wes Craven. I mean, once you saw Drew Barrymore, actual star, again, it's a different example, but that's the last time I can remember a film that opened weekend one and then got bigger in the subsequent weekends because people word of mouth were like, you got to go see Scream. This one succeeded because of the word of mouth coming out of Terrifier 2. And yes, we still get the stories coming out about people leaving the theater and vomiting, and people, they actually opened a complaint line for all the people who are like, it's obviously a joke, but like they're opening a line for people who are calling to talk about the extreme violence. This is a marvel. Like, this is amazing. Like, this is incredible to see what they've done. And again, we said $2 million. That sounds like a lot compared to what they had last time. That's still not a lot of money.
It's not a lot of money. But interestingly enough, like, I'm obviously in modern box office. When I say modern box office, I'm talking like since the 70s, because that was kind of the invention of the blockbuster. There have been the stories of everyone's walking out, people are vomiting, people are passing out, da 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 da. We know it's actually a promotional tactic 9 times out of 10. But think about Terrifier 3 this way. A lot of people showed up this weekend to 2,100 screens, packed the house. I was at a later showing. I couldn't get a good showing. That's how packed this thing was. I couldn't get a good showing. I had to go to a bad showing at a worse theater and all this stuff just to get a showing of it, because it was everyone needed to go. A lot of people in the audience this time around probably never heard of Terrifier 1 or 2. And we're just like, okay, I guess this is supposed to be like some huge, crazy horror movie. Let's see what it's all about. And they were like, oh my bloody fuck. This is fucked up. Like, this is really, really fucked up. Some of the opening images of this film are truly disturbing if you don't watch extreme horror. And, like, French Extremity is kind of different. It's more dramatic. It's very serious. It's very, like, unrelentingly brutal. This is unrelentingly brutal, but it's kind of comical. And it's like the gore is turned all the way up till the dial is fucking ripped off. And so I do think some people walked out. I mean, in my theater, interestingly enough, and we'll probably get more into this in spoilers, but like people were walking out of my theater, but they were walking back in. And I don't want to get into that yet, but a lot of people were like, big fucking slasher scene, somebody gets ripped to shreds. And then, like, literally, I would say between 10 and 15 people would walk out. And then those 10 and 15 people would walk back in. They were taking pee breaks. I don't want to get into it right now, but that's the kind of crowd that I had. What was your experience with Terrifier 3 in the theater?
So I bought my tickets right when they went on sale. And originally there were only a couple of showings. Like my theaters around here were showing it, but they only had a couple of times on Thursday night. So I picked the first 8 p.m. showing Thursday night at the closest theater to my house. By 2 or 3 days before the showing, I went to check just to see what the theater, it was sold out. Now, I ended up switching my showing to a later showing because I don't particularly love sitting. I like being in a full theater. I don't like being in a completely sold out theater because then I just feel like claustrophobic and just too many people around me if I could avoid it. Like, I don't mind a crowded theater, but I like to have a little breathing room. I don't necessarily need everyone around me. So I went to a later showing at like 9:30 and it was still crowded, but I didn't have like 9 people. I had like 2 people 1 seat away from me and 2 people 1 seat away from me on the other side. So like I had a little buffer room there. I actually did. And this didn't happen until when I saw Terrifier 2, there was like maybe 10 people in the theater. And I think we were all late because that was after it opened and everyone's like, oh my God, you got to see this. And then we're like, okay, we got to review this. And so I went to a local theater and I saw it the Sunday matinee. I didn't really expect a lot of people to be there. There was like 10 people in the theater. This time, even on my second showing, it was still packed. And I did see, after a really extreme scene early in the movie, I saw 2 people get up and walk out. I did see it, and they did not come back. So, you know, I think it's real. And what's funny is like, I feel like this is one of those movies that is becoming, like, for me, and you know this because you've seen it, we've had this conversation on and off air. For me, it's Martyrs. Martyrs is a French extreme horror film that I think is brilliant. It's great, and I never want to see it again. It is so unrelenting and fucking just, I mean, it is brutal. It's like, I need I said, I'm an English literature major. I need a better adjective to describe that movie. It's
Martyrs.
It is unflinching. It is just like, man, it's good, but God, do I never want to see that again. It's one of those movies that you like tell your friends about because you want to see their reaction, right? Like I tell people, like they're like, I want a really hard horror film. I'm like, okay, watch Martyrs, report back. And most people that I told watch Martyrs come back like, dude, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, I told you. I think that's kind of what, because again, there is even like a general casual audience that saw Terrifier 2 and said, this is really fucked up, but how great, like how much fun, just old school, brilliant, brutal horror. And then they told their friends, and their friends like, what's this Terrifier thing? Like, oh, you got to see it. And those are the people who are going now being like, this is incredibly fucked up. And they're the ones darting out the theater. So I think there's a combination because this has become that word of mouth movie where it's like the people who love it or know it want to see it. And I think that crowd has grown exponentially since the second one. And I think there's that crowd of people who are like, oh yeah, go see Terrifier 3. Tell me what you think. Because you want to fuck with your friend. You're like, go see it. Tell me what you think. And they're coming out like, dude, you need therapy. Like that's the crowd. And I think it's just stoking a different kind of flame with the horror community because Terrifier 3 at its core, maybe this is a controversial statement, it's not the greatest written movie. It's not the greatest acted movie. It's not the greatest produced movie. I think there's a lot of great things in this movie, but I'm saying like it's not the most polished horror film. But there's just something about this genre that Damien Leone has kind of recreated in a way using that extremism, which doesn't typically do well in horror when you think about it, like in America.
Yeah.
He's created his own genre, and people are flocking to this thing.
I know why. I 100% know why. It's Art the Clown. Art the Clown very quickly became an iconic horror figure. That's not easy to do. It's not easy to just become like an iconic horror figure. Terrifier was not a big hit. It was one of these ones that's like pass the tape around. Have you seen it? Oh, I've seen it. Yeah, yeah, it's fucking hardcore. Like it took a lot of momentum to build up Terrifier 2, and I think we did see it in the second weekend or something like that. It was having a very, very short run, and then that run got extended because of its success. But Art the Clown is a lot of fun. I walked into Party City, Damon. Party City, not Spirit Halloween. Party City, which is a round the year place where you go get balloons for your kid's birthday and da 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 da. They had a full life size Art the Clown like animatronic doll that you could put in front of your house. I saw one at Costco. It's Art the Clown. Like Art the Clown is now an icon. Now there are people that are dressing up like him for Halloween, at Comic Cons, at Dragon Cons. He's a character. He's a perfect character. He really resonated with everybody. And I bet a lot of mainstream people. It's funny. I got a message from one of our listeners who doesn't watch extreme horror. And she was like, and by the way, hi, Veronica, thanks for the message. She was like, should we go see it? I hear it's pretty crazy. And I messaged her back and I was like, yeah, I took my wife who's seen 1 and 2 and liked them both. And she was covering her eyes at parts. She was looking away at parts. My wife watches as much horror as I do, sometimes more, depending on the day. It's hard fucking core shit. But ultimately, everybody was excited to see Art on screen. They just want him back on screen. And be careful what you fucking wish for. Because Art will fuck your shit up. Art will give you images that you can't put away. I'm still not putting away images from Terrifier 2 specifically. And then Terrifier 1 is, it has its own things too, where you're just like, yeah, I can't forget that. Those are the Art moments. So it's weird because the world at large is like, hey, it's Art the Clown. It's Art the Clown. And it's like, yeah, do you know what the fuck Art the Clown does? It's fucked.
Yeah, I think the last time we had a horror icon of this magnitude was Ghostface, and that's Scream. I mean, that was 1996. That's over 20 years ago. Like, yep. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Like, I don't think we, necessarily need a horror icon to pop up every 3 years. But when you think about the horror icons, you think about Michael Myers, you think about Freddy Krueger, you think about Jason Voorhees, you think about the T-shirt I'm wearing right now, you think about Leatherface. You think about a few of those, and then Ghostface is probably the most recent one. Scream is, one of the most successful horror franchises the last 50 years of all time, really. Mm-hmm. That's really it. And then you got Art the Clown, and Art the Clown has become an icon. There are people who have Art the Clown. Art the Clown is so big now. People are wearing Art the Clown T-shirts who have never seen Terrifier. Like, they just know it's an icon. That's like a band. Like, when you see the videos online, there's someone's wearing a Journey shirt, and they're like, name 3 songs by Journey. And the girl's like, I don't know. Art the Clown has become that iconic. They just see this creepy-ass, crazy-looking clown, and they're like, I want to buy that T-shirt. It's not a bad thing, by the way. Like, no. You could wear your T-shirt. I don't really care about the band thing either. Like, wear what you want. I don't care. But that's how big this has gotten. Is like, they're just like, yeah, Art the Clown is an icon. And this film, just to give you a little detail, again, when I say plot, I mean, what are people looking for in a Terrifier movie? They're looking for Art the Clown to come in and fuck shit up, as you said so eloquently. That's what a Terrifier movie is at its heart, right? Yes, there is a story beyond that, and we will get into that more in spoilers. But this movie starts 5 years after Terrifier 2 ended, which I thought was really funny. Damien Leone explained that his original plan was the Terrifier 2 took place on Halloween. The original plan was for Terrifier 3 to start that Christmas, like 2 months later. He had to change it because Elliot Fulham, the kid who plays Jonathan, the younger brother of Sienna Shaw, got so much older and taller that he's like, we can't do this. We can't make it 2 months later. He's going to look like a totally different person. So they skipped that 5 years. So this movie picks up 5 years after the events of Terrifier 2. Jonathan is now in college. Sienna has been in and out of psychiatric wards for the past 5 years, trying to get her life back together, trying to get her mentality back together, which totally understandable. And on the day Terrifier 3 picks up, she's getting out of a facility and staying with her aunt and uncle in their house along with her niece named Gabby. And that's around the same exact time that Art the Clown is back for the attack, and he's returned to Miles County to wreak havoc, this time at Christmas.
Art's here for Christmas. And I loved that right away. Like when the first very teaser image came out, it's like Art wearing a Santa costume. I was like, yeah, I want that. I want whatever that is. And I think we said it too when we were talking about Terrifier 2, and maybe we were talking about other things. I don't really quite remember when, but we said like we have a bona fide franchise on our hands. We really do, and not a little one. Like and no offense to Hatchet. This isn't Hatchet, right? Where it's like, hey, cool, Hatchet 3 made $18 million at the box office. It never happened. That's not what that was, but it was extreme crazy horror that we all know and love, like I fucking love Kane Hodder, obviously. This we have a bona fide franchise that will demand, Damon, more sequels. And that brings me to my big point for the non-spoiler section, which is like Damien Leone's in a bit of a pickle here. You talk about careful what you wish for. When the success happens, when all of a sudden Art the Clown is like an important piece of IP, which is a dirty word sometimes, he's selling T-shirts, he's selling mugs, he's selling Halloween decorations. Kids are going to start dressing as Art the Clown for like he's a brand now. Damien Leone is sitting on now a gold mine that these studios are going to want. And they're going to walk up to him with the kind of money that he's not going to be able to say no to. So I'm curious, Damon, what is next for the Terrifier franchise and this is not like the spoiler section stuff. Like I'm not saying what do we want to see? Like that's something we'll do later in the podcast. I'm talking more about like, is it going mainstream? Is it going to be at Paramount for Terrifier 4? Is it going to be at Universal? Is it going to be produced by Jordan Peele? Like, you know what I mean? Like this now Terrifier 4 is going to make a lot of money. Can Damien Leone actually keep it indie for the next one? I don't know if he has a shot at doing that.
I think there's a couple of key factors in that. One, again, obviously this is a franchise that was started and partially owned by the website Bloody Disgusting, and they run their own streaming service, and so they have a piece in this pie as well. But Damien Leone is the creator and everything behind it. And again, this had financing behind it. Again, $2 million compared to crowdfunded for $250,000. I think where Damien Leone is going to be able to keep a little bit more control over this franchise versus going to a Paramount or a Sony or one of those studios is because as much as this franchise has now proven to be a winner, I think there's still going to be those studio executives who are going to be scared away by the extreme horror because you can't make a Terrifier movie. You cannot make a movie with Art the Clown without that. That's what this franchise is about. To take that away or to try to like numb it down a little bit, to try to like take it away a little bit, take it down a couple notches, it's not Terrifier. So I think we're still going to see the indie nature of this for that reason. If this was just like, and I'm, by the way, just to be totally like upfront and honest, this is not a knock, but when our guys, the Philippou brothers, sold Talk to Me to A24, now A24 is still an indie studio, but it's a big indie studio. Like that's an Oscar-winning indie studio. When they sold Talk to Me to A24, and then they immediately signed on to do the sequel, and now they're doing another movie for A24, and they originally signed on to do the Street Fighter movie for Paramount or whoever. Now, I know that went away, but that's typically how it works. You make your little indie film, people find it, love it, watch it, and then you start getting Marvel offers. You start coming, hey, do you want to go? Hey, do you want to come direct this Black Panther movie? Do you want to come direct this Spider-Man movie? Like, that's how this works. But Talk to Me, as brilliant as it wasn't extreme horror. And I think that's where Damien Leone is able to take and hold on to control of this, because I still think as $18 million, number one at the box office, at some point, some stuffed shirt is going to sit down and say, okay, I think we got to invest in this. And then they're going to watch it, and they're going to walk out, puke in their bucket, and say, never mind. Because I think this is such a weird niche product that it's hard to wrap your head around, because it's not a concept like Nightmare on Elm Street where it's a dream demon. And yes, there are some extreme early. I mean, you can argue there's some pretty extreme kills in the early Nightmare on Elm Street movies. But that's still ultimately about a character, Freddy Krueger. He's, as the movies went on, it got a little goofier and things like that. But again, not to this level. You can't do Terrifier without art absolutely dismembering somebody in the worst, most horrific ways possible. That's what people are going to see. If you take that away, it's not that series anymore. And I think at best, I think you might get like a Neon or an A24 saying, we want to get in the Terrifier business. Make it how you want to make it, but we want to get in on it a little bit. And then you let, we talked about the brilliance of the Neon team, the way they marketed Longlegs, or the brilliance of A24, the way they market their films. They're not a massive studio, they're an indie studio. I think that's as far as it goes. I don't think it ever goes as far as like Sony picking up the phone to say, David Leone, come, we want to be in business with you. We want to see some dismemberment on screen. I think it's still safe just because of how hardcore it is.
Probably. I mean, I think the brutality of it will probably keep it more indie. But boy, like even A24, which is now producing $100 million feature films, like they have that kind of cachet now. Like even they could be like, I don't know if this is like on brand with us. But Neon might be like, well, fuck you. And I'm trying to think about who, I can't remember which studio did The Substance, but The Substance won at Venice, and that's a pretty extreme film. It's not this extreme, but it's pretty extreme to win at Venice, to win at Cannes.
They won at Cannes. Yeah, they won at Cannes.
Yeah. To win at Cannes, excuse me. To win at Cannes, that movie's extreme. Like it is. I could compare that to The Fly in terms of body horror. Like it's really super intense. So I'm like, I think the big dogs are knocking. I think they are coming. And I think they will do the thing where they're like, hey, yeah, do your thing. We're just going to put our promotional power behind it. And you're not, they're not going to, and obviously a studio is going to go, well, it's extreme horror. So we'll give him 4 million. He got 2.5 last time. Well, let's give him 4. And then we'll put our promotional power behind it. And all he needs to do is make 50 million at the box office and we're gold. The studios know now. This year has been unquestionably the year of horror for the box office. And so they're like, shit, like we have to invest in this stuff. And now they gotta dip their toe into a puddle of whatever art has slaughtered and go, yeah, all right, shit, okay, I guess we're doing this now, because horror's undeniably selling. It's undeniably selling. And I'm curious if Damien Leone is just like, I'll privately fund it. I think his producer is Phil Falcone. Maybe the two of them just go, look, we'll find the private investor. We have the numbers and the data to back this up, and we keep it completely independent and we pocket that cash. We don't need the studios. I'm kind of hoping that's the way they go. But ultimately, I think this is and I think you and I off podcast were texting. This is almost a Friday the 13th situation. Sean S. Cunningham was making a ripoff of Halloween, was making a ripoff of The Burning that hadn't even come out yet. And all of a sudden, it was a monster he couldn't control. It was gigantic. Art is gigantic now. Art could be going up against Godzilla -2. Like it's that he's that big of a piece of property now. And so I'm so curious of what the challenges are ahead. And I'll say this, Damon, maybe this is a controversial take. I don't necessarily care if the story doesn't continue on this path. I think for sure Terrifier 4 is, without any spoilers, going to continue its story. It has a very, very specific story that's trying to wrap up. But I don't think it's the end of Terrifier 4 is the end of Art the Clown. I don't think he goes anywhere. I think he keeps coming. And so once he keeps coming, you have to move on from this. And I know we're dancing very close to like our spoiler stuff. So I'll stop there, Damon, and just say to you, I'm a proud horror fanatic today. I'm not even telling you my feelings on the movie. I'm just so elated that this indie, extreme, goofy, bloody, gory, crazy, nutty film, Terrifier 3, is the #1 movie at the box office. It's fucking crazy.
Real quick, before we get to a couple categories and get into spoilers, for the people who are listening to this who haven't seen it yet, I want to be clear about this one thing, because I imagine and again, as you said, there's probably people seeing Terrifier 3 who haven't seen Terrifier or Terrifier 2. But I would imagine the majority of our audience probably has at least seen Terrifier 2. I would assume.
Probably.
Here's what I'll say in like the non-spoiler review section, because before we get to spoilers, I want to make sure we give them that part of the film. Here's what I'll say about Terrifier 3. It is a Terrifier movie. Now, take that for what it is, because there are going to be people, and again, I'm a story guy. I preach that, bang that drum all the time. I'm a story guy, and Terrifier, while it does have a story and actually develop more in parts 2 and 3, it's still ultimately about Art dismembering people. That's really what these movies are about. Art and his creative way to kill people. If that's what you're into this for, and I would imagine at least 80% of the Terrifier audience, that's what they're going for, to see how Art kills people, you're going to be totally satisfied with this movie. You're going to go and you're going to get exactly what you paid for. You're going to see Art creatively just butcher a whole bunch of people and do it even in more extreme ways than Terrifier 2, which seems maybe a little hard to fathom, but it's true. So just on a review side, I want to say that because like every review I've seen from like horror creators, the people who love Terrifier 2 are like, oh, this is great. It was exactly what I needed. It scratched me where I itched. It was exactly what I wanted. And the people who were like not real big fans of Terrifier 2, because they're just like, it's not my thing, they're saying the same thing about Terrifier 3. They're like, yeah, I get it, just not my thing. That's kind of my point here. If you are a Terrifier 2 fan, you're going to go see Terrifier 3 and you're going to be totally satisfied. And you're going to come out and say, ooh, I saw him do this and he did that and he did this and oh my God, that was crazy. And this was, oh my God, it made me cringe and I wanted to vomit. That's what you're going for this for. You're going to enjoy it. If you saw Terrifier 2 and you're like, well, let me give Terrifier 3 a chance because maybe it'll be a little different, you're going to be sorely mistaken, because this is very much an extension and almost like it's like taking Terrifier 2, multiplying it by 3, and then putting it on screen as Terrifier 3. So I'm just being clear and saying, like, this is a Terrifier movie. Know what you're getting yourself into. If you're a fan of this franchise, you're going to enjoy it. If you're not a fan of this franchise, don't go in thinking Damien Leone recreated the wheel and did something totally different with this movie, and suddenly Art the Clown is calling people saying, what's your favorite scary movie? It ain't that shit, okay? That's not this movie, never will be this movie, so just get that out of your head. So I just want to be clear to the audience, like, if you like Terrifier 2, you're going to like Terrifier 3. If you didn't like Terrifier 2 and the extreme kills are not for you, you're still not going to like Terrifier 3 because it's even more.
Yeah, I saw a creator say something that I thought was very apropos, which is like, as with regards to people who have seen the Terrifier franchise, we're not winning any new fans. We're not losing any people. It's like, it's literally net zero, because you just like you said, it's an extension of Terrifier 2. It is all the same DNA. It is all the same stuff. It's the same style. Like the directing style from 1 to 2 to 3 hasn't really changed either. Like how the characters interact hasn't really changed much from 2 to 3. They're pretty much the same thing. So yeah, if you're sitting on the fence and you're like, oh, if you're one of those edgelords who's like, they fucking sold out, they're the #1 movie in America, they probably suck now, bro. Because it's definitely a guy saying that. I'm telling you right now, it's exactly the same Terrifier movie that you fell in love with. It just happens to be #1 at the box office.
Yeah, so I just want to throw that out there. So as we get into categories, and then we'll warn you we're getting to spoilers. We're going to kick things off as we always do with best performance. And Patrick, I would love to sit here and say that we're going to have this nuanced conversation about best performance, but I think we know there's two people who have really become household names outside of Damien Leone, of course. But I'm saying, like, in the actual performance, there's two people who have become stars out of this franchise. It's David Howard Thornton as Art the Clown, and it's Lauren Levera as Sienna Shaw. So pick and choose your best performance. It's going to be one of those two.
It is. Yeah, my best performance, 100%. Welcome to prime time, bitch. I'm not calling Lauren Levera bitch. That's just what we call it. Welcome to prime time, bitch, because Lauren Levera as Sienna is everyone's new favorite final girl, everyone's favorite scream queen. Lauren Levera gets more in this movie. She gets more time. She gets a much more, I think, thoughtful backstory than before. And let's be honest, we love watching her go against Art. Like, that was the one thing about Terrifier 2. I had my issues with Terrifier 2, but I was like, man, there is a really solid character up against him. You know, she's going through her own shit. She's like the rest of us. She got blindsided by this big rig Art the Clown, and she's trying to deal with it. Lauren Lavera really knows how to live in this world. And I have a sneaking suspicion, without any spoilers, that we'll see her in Terrifier 4. I think her and Art the Clown are meant to dance together. And you know, what's really cool is that it's really going to blow her fucking career up. I'm not going to claim that she's the next Jamie Lee Curtis. I have no idea. I kind of hope so. Like, I hope so for her. She's a sweetheart of a person. She's really great on social media. She does a lot of interviews with a lot of people, and you can tell she's grateful to be here. But truth be told, aside from all of that, she could be a raging asshole. The point is, she's good at this. She's good at what she does here. And I hope it keeps happening, because I think her performance is integral to the success of these movies.
So I'm just going to echo that and say my best performance is also Lauren Lavera, and I think I said that last year as well. And I think what I love most about her performance in this one is that Damien Leone gives her more to chew on this time. You know, like,
Yeah.
not that she was, again, she was great in the last film as well, but he gives her a lot more to chew on in this film. And, you know, a little bit more emotionality and things like that, a little bit more range of emotions in this one. It's not just, you know, in the beginning, in the original one, it was almost like, you know, she went to a party, she was, you know, trying to enjoy herself, and then she gets attacked by Art the Clown. It becomes a harrowing, you know, cat and mouse fight for survival. In this film, she has to play, you know, very much like we talked about with 2018's Halloween, where Laurie Strode is dealing with 40 years of trauma, being attacked by a masked killer when she was 17 years old. This is very much that, where Sienna's been in and out of psych wards, and she's still, 5 years later, still not altogether again, because you wouldn't be altogether again if you went and did what she had to go through in Terrifier 2. And she does a really, really good job at that. And I think what I like most, because I read some interviews with her about this, she actually has a background in martial arts and kickboxing. And her first real breakout was serving as a body double for Anya Taylor-Joy on the movie Split. She did like the action scenes. She was her body double in those scenes. So like when, you know, she's fighting James McAvoy, that's Lauren Lavera doing that, because she's very athletic. She's got a martial arts background, and she stood in for Anya Taylor-Joy in those moments. I actually think she stood in for all the three lead girls, just mostly Anya Taylor-Joy because she was the lead. That was her first real big role, and that was as a body double. So she actually talked about how she had to like tamp down her aggression and her fight instincts, because, you know, she's not supposed to just like kick the shit out of Art the Clown. That's kind of ruins the whole point of the movie. Art the Clown attacks and she just beats the shit out of him. So she actually has to like chew on more scenery in this movie, and I think she does an incredible job at that. And again, as you said, I have no idea, is she going to go on to be Jamie Lee Curtis? I don't know. I will say I saw her in The Well, another movie that I reviewed and posted a review over on rewindthelivingdead.com, and I thought she did incredible in that movie. So yeah, like, she's great. And you know, I think this is a much different version of that character than what we saw in part two, because in part two, it was the first time she's encountering Art the Clown, and she really doesn't encounter him, like full on encounter him, until late in the movie. She meets him in that costume store, but then she doesn't really encounter him until the last like 30 minutes of the movie. This time, she's still so traumatized from the last one that it's still haunting her life, and it's haunting every aspect of her life. And so I think she just gets more to chew on, and she's great in this role. And I know I'm going to call bullshit, and Damien Leone, if you listen to this, I love you, buddy, but he's said openly that he's had a very like full-on plan for this franchise, and he said that he wants to wrap up this story in either Terrifier 4, potentially into Terrifier 5, depending on how the story plays out. And he said that Sienna Shaw, Lauren Lavera's character, is just as integral to his story as Art the Clown is. I can agree with all that. But when he talks about the grand plan started with Terrifier 2 and with her performance and the reaction to that. Because if you watch Terrifier 1, it's nothing of that. Like, I watched Terrifier 1, the original one, thinking the girl he was battling in that movie was going to survive, because that's how these movies are supposed to work. You get a villain, you get a final girl. That's how slashers typically work. There's not a survivor in that movie, really. And so while there is a character that does carry over, Vicky, who you see in part 2 at the very end of the movie, and not that this is a spoiler, you know she's going to show up in part 3 as well, this was not a grand design. This was grand design started with part two, so it's almost like we're starting over. This is kind of like the sequel of part two. Like Terrifier 1 exists, but this is really like Terrifier 2 right now. But she shines, and I'm giving Damien Leone credit for not only finding her, but giving her enough to chew on that she actually really does great in this movie.
Yeah, the grand design was holy shit, people love Lauren Rivera, and this movie made a lot of money. We'll keep that train rolling. That's the grand design right there. And hats off to him for doing that and recognizing that and just going, yeah, like we have an opportunity here, which the only other movie I can think of that does this properly is the Scream franchise, which is from one movie to the next, our final girl actually keeps her story going. We didn't get that in Friday the 13th. We didn't get that in Nightmare on Elm Street. There was a break in the story there too. We're going to get like, oh, I faced off against a psychopathic, murderous, demonic clown who slaughtered most of my family and friends. And right in the very next movie, we deal with the aftermath of that. Right away. We didn't wait to 40 years to like we did with Laurie Strode to get that. Like they kind of bounced around for Halloween for 40 years. They bounced around until they decided to actually come back to, well, geez, whatever happened to Laurie Strode after that terrible first night when she was 17 years old? We're getting right to it. And it's because of Lauren Rivera.
Yeah. Let's talk about MVP, Patrick. This is our Ken Foray Banana Hammock MVP award, named after a great character actor Ken Foray from the movie From Beyond, when he jumped down a flight of stairs and into a basement to kill a creature wearing nothing more than a thong bikini. If that's not an MVP performance, I don't know what is. So, Patrick, when it comes to Terrifier 3, who gets your MVP?
Damon, you said it. There are two names on this list, and it's not even close. No offense to anybody else. But the MVP of not just Terrifier 3, but the entire series is David Howard Thornton as Art the Clown. Congratulations. You are the new Robert Englund, right? You are the new man behind the mask. Like you just are. And I will say in Terrifier 3, I think some people were like, maybe there was a little bit of like, a prisoner of the moment situation where they were being a bit hyperbolic and they were like, he's like Freddy and all that stuff. Like, no, he's not really like Freddy. He's very much like Art, and he does art things. And he didn't like all of a sudden explode in this one. And he's like all over this one. He's still in it very sparingly. He's in there for the kill moments and all that good stuff. Not a ton of plot around him. When he creeps in, blood is going to spill. But David Howard Thornton continues to kind of add just a little bit more layer, a little bit more character to Art the Clown, and he has to do it with no words. That's hard to do. He's doing it as a clown, as a mime clown that doesn't speak. He's weaving more and more layers into Art the Clown in a fun way, in a fun and easy way. He's not trying something wild this time out. It's like he's going, oh, I can see how I can build on a couple of things I did in those last two movies. Let me try that here. And it's fun and it's entertaining, and he is the face behind the mask. I'm sure one day he might decide he's going to hang up the mask and someone else will take the reins, and that's fine. That's per tradition. In this genre, we do that. But for now, David Howard Thornton, we speak your name.
I mean, listen, I give him a lot of credit because this is a movie that is based solely upon reactions and mannerisms because you can't talk. And let's also not forget, if you've watched the videos online of David Howard Thornton getting the makeup put on, you're not really seeing his face either. You're seeing a whole lot of makeup and prosthetics, and, you're seeing his eyes. This is really the only thing on his entire face you're actually seeing. Like, this isn't just makeup on a guy. Like, this is full on a prosthetic face, nose, mouth, everything. So really all you're seeing is his mannerisms, and you occasionally see his eyes, and that's pretty much it. So to actually come out and kind of steal the show in a lot of ways and do what he does with Art the Clown and do it in a way that is both scary and menacing, but also weirdly funny, which is hard to say when you're talking about like, someone's getting their intestines ripped out or whatever, and you're like, this is kind of funny. It's a pretty marvelous performance. It's a pretty marvelous feat to be able to do that. And again, that's why my MVP, as much as you're right about David Howard Thornton, I also got to give my MVP to the man behind it all, which is Damien Leone, because I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Terrifier is the best written horror film I've ever seen. It's not. It's good. I like it. But I'm saying, like, this isn't a movie where I'm like, man, this script is just, man, oh boy, this is Oscar-worthy stuff. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, on a $2 million budget, this is the best produced horror movie. There are cleaner and more polished horror films. I think Damien Leone would tell you there's more polished horror films out there because they have $20 million budgets and, teams of like hundreds doing a film where he has, like, he increased his crew by like from like 6 to like 20 this time. It's like they had a much bigger crew. 20 is like their crew now. But remember, this is his brainchild. He created Art the Clown. He found David Howard Thornton. He found Lauren Levera. He found Elliot Fulham. This is all one guy. This isn't a giant studio who had a casting director and, a great cinematographer, an Oscar-winning sound designer. And these are toys that other filmmakers, by the way, that's not their fault. I'm not saying they're not good at what they're doing.
That's how a lot of great films get made.
You listen to Quentin Tarantino, who's my guy. He talks all the time about his cinematographers. Like, he praises it. He worships cinematographers because he knows how valuable they are to his production. Damien Leone didn't have any of that. This is mostly a Damien Leone production. Now, again, it got bigger this time, but you don't get David Howard Thornton. You don't get Lauren Levera. You don't get Art the Clown without Damien Leone. So maybe I'm getting repetitive, but like my MVP probably for the rest of the series is going to be Damien Leone because without his insight in doing this, we wouldn't be here. Like, this is a very much a one-man show for a lot of this.
It has been up until Terrifier 3. Terrifier 3 was the first time, by the way, and we've talked about this before, but it's the first time that he's given over the gore effects to another company. Another company focused on that, and he solely focused on the directing and the writing this time out and working with the actors and all, like just being a director, right? Because I could definitely agree with you on Terrifier 1 and Terrifier 2. Damien Leone was the MVP because he was doing everything. He was working with the actors. He was writing the story, and then he was out there crafting the gore and going, okay, how do I rip somebody's face off? Oh, let's try it like that. And he's like spending up all night, like working on like gore effects so that it'll work in the scene that he's directing tomorrow and the actor he's directing tomorrow. That's exhausting, man. That is the heart of a fucking champion. That is super hard shit to do when you have to do everything. I'm working on effects for my current short film that I'm getting set up for. I had to hire a guy out of LA. I went up there. I did the process with him. His process takes days and days and days and days. Just his process. All he's doing is focusing on the gore stuff. Damien Leone was focusing on the gore stuff and directing and making sure people are getting fed and making sure that the actors are being heard and all that stuff. That's crazy. For Terrifier 3, all that stuff was finally handled by somebody else, and I'm glad. And a lot of people said, oh, you could really see the difference in the directing and the editing this time around. He even got another editor, right? He was editing this stuff too. I still really didn't see the difference between the other movies and this, even though now his hands were solely on the writing and the directing and the creative vision of the movie. But Damon, as we said earlier, the creative vision of Terrifier as a franchise was still very much intact. He didn't lose sight of that. Is that always a good thing? We're going to save that for spoilers because I have some thoughts there. I really do. But David Howard Thornton, one of the hardest working guys in the business, I'm very excited for him. I'm very happy for him because this level of success is going to change his life in an amazing way. And it's because he literally, when I say he put the work in, physically put the work in, like very few directors I've ever seen. I'm immensely, immensely happy and supportive of this guy.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what the next few years hold for him. I think the next couple of years is going to be all about Terrifier, but there's going to come a day where he's going to do something else, and we're going to see what Damien Leone is really made of. And listen, hey, you know what? You could never do another thing for the rest of your life. You've already won. You're playing with house money at this point because of what you've done with Terrifier. So kudos to you, Damien Leone. With that being said, Patrick, we are now going to get into spoilers. So if you haven't seen Terrifier 3, it is, of course, in theaters. It's the #1 movie in America. Go check it out. Come back and see us after this, but for now, we are officially getting into spoilers, so you've been forewarned. So if you haven't seen Terrifier 3, here we go. If you have seen Terrifier 3, here we go. So we are in full-on spoiler mode now, and with that being October is our special month of Halloween and horror movies, we are very happy to welcome in our special guest for Terrifier 3, our old friend, Horror Chronicles herself, the host of the Hello Sydney podcast, our friend Sid. Sid, I know we had you on, the first time we had you on was for Terrifier, and we said at that point, you got to come on for Terrifier 3. Here we are literally 1 year later.
A whole
Terrifier 3
year.
is now out in the universe. It is out in the world now.
I love that it came full circle and we actually followed through with this.
It is
The
actually
returning champion,
Yes,
Sid,
the
Horror
Terrifier
Chronicles
champion.
herself.
You know, I probably told you this on the Terrifier podcast. Like, I think one of the first videos of yours that I discovered, which made me follow you, was your Terrifier 2 review. Because at that point, like, as much of a horror fan as I am, I still wasn't super exposed to Terrifier at that point. And I remember seeing your review, and then it kind of blew up, and I was like, all right, I got to go see this thing. And so, like, I think we were like a week behind everybody else because we didn't know it was going to blow up like that.
Yeah, it really wasn't mainstream at that point because like the first one hadn't had like a theater release. It just showed up on Netflix one day. So Terrifier 2 comes to theaters and everybody's like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah. And now Terrifier 3 is the #1 movie in America. How fucking wild is that?
I'm proud of them for that. That's absolutely fucking incredible for an independent horror movie. It's amazing.
I'm proud of all of us because we're like all super weirdos who like this shit.
Yeah.
And it's like that proved our like purchasing power in the market. It's like, no, we're here too.
Yeah. I love that too. And Damien even said that like in the caption of his post about it, he was like, never underestimate horror fans. And it is the truest thing I've ever heard.
So true.
My favorite thing is every article I've seen in all the major trades, like Variety, Hollywood Reporter, they're all like, Terrifier 3 #1. How did this happen? Terrifier 3 #1. What is going on? Like, they're all like still
and we're like, hi.
It's hilarious. No one's like, what? How do we react to this? This is a movie about dismemberment and disgusting acts of gore. How does this work?
There are children dying.
That's because we're here. Which was your prediction for Terrifier 3?
I knew it. I knew it. I knew that was Art's next step. I like felt it in my soul that was where it was going to go.
Yeah, it was fuck them kids like all day, and you just knew it was coming. I was like, there's no way when I saw that first teaser with the Christmas thing and like a kid coming down the stairs, I was like, yeah, the kid's gonna get it. Of course he's gonna get it. Like, this is Art the Clown. He has no limit. He has no barrier. And I think Terrifier 3 like completely proved that.
Absolutely. He hates everybody equally. He doesn't discriminate.
Yes.
Appreciate that, Art. All right, so after the spoilers, we always at the beginning of our show we usually do like we give like a general sense of the plot, but obviously we don't give away any secrets. But now that we are in the spoiler section, I have asked our good friend Sid, who one of my favorite videos that she does on TikTok are her spoiler videos. And the funny thing about your spoiler videos, because obviously I've seen the movies you're talking about, but I still get so geeked out because I'm like, did I miss something? Did she catch something I didn't catch? Yeah. So your spoiler videos are one of her. So I want to give you the honor of telling us the plot of Terrifier 3, full spoilers.
Okay, let's see if I can do this like kind of rapid fire because you guys know I could talk about this shit all fucking day. So opening kills a child. Let's just put that out here right now. Like, first kill, child. It's Christmas. We come up on this house and we see Art the Clown dressed as fucking Santa Claus putting gifts in front of a tree, and he absolutely murks this whole family, including 2 children. And then he and Vicky go on this like rest. They rest for 5 years, and we jump to 5 years after the whole Miles County incident, and we meet our final girl, our queen, Sienna. And Sienna has been in and out of a psychiatric facility. Obviously, she's fucked up because who wouldn't be by this whole thing? And she goes to stay with her aunt and uncle because her whole family's dead. She's an orphan. Jonathan's off in college living his life somehow. And his roommate is some like super annoying bitch who just like wants to have him on her true crime podcast and is totally like exploiting him about it. Sienna has a little cousin named Gabby who's a child. And you're like, oh shit. Is she going to be safe? Because Art's philosophy in this movie is fuck them kids. So 5 years later, we see Art and Vicky reanimate when these like construction workers awaken them when they come into their home. We see Vicky do some like exorcist shit with a piece of glass. that was really fucked up. And then I just got stopped in my tracks because I'm like, oh God, yeah, that happened. And then obviously Art sets out to get Sienna again 5 years later, just when you think she's safe. And on the way, he stops at a bar and he sees Santa Claus. And obviously he has to violently kill Santa Claus with liquid nitrogen and steal his persona and take on Santa Claus. So he does that, and then he goes around just wreaking absolute havoc. He blows up a bunch of children in a mall. Like, nobody is safe. All the kids, fuck them kids. Nobody's safe around Art. And eventually he finds Sienna. And at this point, he kills Sienna's uncle. We think maybe kills Jonathan, and then he kills Sienna's aunt. And I think one of the most brutal kills that we have yet, that I think is going to be a super underrated one, because I haven't heard a lot of people talk about the rat kill. And then they reveal that they killed Gabby, but then plot twist, they actually didn't kill Gabby. And Vicky is this like host for a demon, we find out, and she puts this crown of thorns on Sienna's head. And eventually Sienna had to go back to the Terrifier to get the sword that she had used in the first movie to vanquish Art the Clown and to decapitate him. However, we know that is under the tree because Gabby's a snoop and she already looked at the gift, and she gives it to Sienna, and Sienna uses the sword to then kill Vicky. And then as fight ensues between her and Art the Clown, there's a chainsaw involved. Oh my God, I missed the chainsaw bathroom scene. There's a bathroom scene. Art absolutely decimates this couple. Literally. Do I even say it? Should I say it? Should I say what he does?
Spoilers. Say whatever the hell you want.
Art literally takes this chainsaw and shoves it up this guy's ass and just cuts him in half. You see full balls, all of it, everything, just pure out in the open. And it's one of those things that make you realize, I can't believe I'm watching this in a theater with people around me. Is this really happening to me? How is this even playing? How is this even possible? And what happens next? Okay, so Sienna vanquishes Vicky, and then she stabs Art. However, Vicky's blood creates this like acid and causes the floor to open up and creates a portal to hell, in which Gabby falls into. Sienna then has to let Art go and tries to save Gabby, and she grabs the sharp side of her knife and tries to pull her up with it, and it's absolutely vile, and she loses it, and Gabby falls into hell. And Art gets on a bus completely unbothered by this whole thing, covered in blood, looks at a woman reading the Ninth Circle book, because we know that's where he's heading back to. And that's where Terrifier 4 is going to take place, because Sienna is going to go to hell to save Gabby.
So succinct. So hilarious.
Like, I feel like there's still so much I missed, because it's a 2-hour movie and like it doesn't feel like 2 hours, but when you think of it, like that's a long time. Like there's so much that happens.
It is a lot of movie, and it's funny because we get a lot of the plot in the last like 35 to 40 minutes, like with the revelation about the demon and the possession, and then at one point Vicky tries to transfer her soul to Sienna because Sienna's lost everything, which I thought was one of the more interesting plot points, which was the whole like, when you've lost everything, you're open to that possession. Because Vicky, we saw in the very first Terrifier, when she gets ripped up and torn up and she ends up killing the TV show host when she gets committed, we learned that she's lost everything because her beauty and everything was like her most important thing, and she gets ripped apart. And so I like that element they injected to say like they tortured Sienna by killing her aunt, saying they killed Gabby, and then also saying they killed Jonathan purely because they wanted to take her soul. They wanted to take over her body. And I like that little element of saying, like, you've lost everything now, let me in. I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah. Incredible.
And that kind of rolls right into, I guess, our face huggables, right? Because this is a newer section, Sid, where we have what we call face huggables, things that we like love about the movie. And I just wanted to piggyback right off of what Damon said right there. I love that new little twist of lore came out in this movie, which was like, oh yeah, like when you lose everything, you become susceptible to Art the Clown. I almost wish that happened in the beginning of the movie, like something, or just some just some hint of that's what's going to happen. I mean, the beginning of the movie does focus on Vicky a lot, but that was one of those things I really liked.
Yeah, and I feel like that's kind of be what that's going to be like what this franchise turns into, because I feel like in Terrifier 4 we're going to get a lot more things revealed that makes us look back in retrospect and be like, "Oh, so that's where they were going with this. Like this was significant, but at the time we didn't understand it, but like now we do know that the whole thing's out."
Yeah, it's interesting because I know like you did a tremendous video on your TikTok, so I'm not gonna make you repeat everything. So I do want to talk about our theories about where this is going from here into Terrifier 4. We'll do that later. But you
Yeah.
talked about like going back in time. And I've said that I think Damien Leone's greatest idea beyond Art the Clown, of course, was introducing Sienna in the second movie and giving
Yeah.
him a foil, giving him a final girl. And that dichotomy and that transition into this movie and then giving that extra layer. And I said this earlier, and I'll say it now, and I think you'll probably agree with me. I said the one thing, if you want to criticize, not criticize, but you want to say Damien Leone, he finally figured a way to write himself into a corner. It's he needed someone to finally talk, and so like Art can't
Yes.
talk, so he had to have Vicky there to like kind of a little bit explain things to Sienna, because like
Yeah.
it was funny because I'm like, Art doesn't say anything, so you need to have someone talking for him. And I was like, this was Damien Leone like throwing in the towel and saying, all right, someone has to talk here. Like someone has to explain this.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I actually said the same thing. And I was like, I feel like that's why the little pale girl wasn't in this one at all, because Art needed a different sidekick that can actually vocalize what's going on for people to understand that this isn't just like senseless gore and senseless violence against these people.
Yeah, I think there were way too many people in the discourse saying like, "Oh, you know, there's no real story in these movies." I was like, "No, there's like tons of story in 2 and 3. There's tons of story. In 1,
Yeah.
there's not really story." And you said like we'll look back in retrospect, and really what I think more is like I think Damien Leone is going to retrofit the
Mm-hmm.
future based on what has been laid in the past and be like, you know what? I can use that. You know what? I can use that. And I think that's how he's been moving through this, which is a hard way to write, by the way. It's a really hard way to go. Basically, like I've painted myself into a corner. I have to get myself out, is what he's doing.
Yeah.
I think it's working. It's just a matter of like how he lays it all out and what he decides to emphasize in the next film or possibly 2 films.
Yeah, I do agree with that. Like, I honestly think at this point, I don't even know if he knows where it's going. So, like, everybody has
That's
all
why I
these
joked
theories.
on your
Yeah.
TikTok. I joked. I was like, "Is Damien writing all this down?" Because
Yeah.
you laid this theory out that I was like, this literally connects all the way back to the first appearance of Art the Clown in a short film, like over 10 years ago. And Sydney has it all laid out. So Damien
Yeah.
better be watching this and going, "Yes, actually, folks, that's definitely what I was doing. That's
Totally.
everything definitely laid out like that on purpose."
It was my plan the whole time.
It totally my plan.
Damien, if you're listening, give me a writing credit on Terrifier 4. Thank you.
I think the tough thing, the balancing act here with this movie, and I think again he did it well in Terrifier 2, and I think he did it well enough in Terrifier 3. Although again, if I was gonna have a small complaint, I like the dynamic of Sienna and Art. I like that battle. And there's part of me that's
Yeah.
like, I kind of wish we'd been able to get to it a little sooner, because even though like I know he said he edited a lot of this movie and had to get it down to whatever it was 2 hours and 5 minutes. The last like 35 minutes, the actual Sienna and Art stuff felt kind of rushed to me. Like I was like, man, I want a little bit more of this. Like I want a little bit more back and forth, a little bit more of a battle. Again, I understand they're kind of holding it out, so she's like convinced he's there, but she doesn't know for sure he's there. So I get what they're doing, but I that's what I loved. Like I like the original Terrifier for what it is. I mean, it's got some great gore, some great kills. We talked about it, we reviewed it on this podcast with you, Sid, but I love Terrifier too, and it's because they injected the story, because they injected the mythology, because they injected a foil and a counter to Art's evil, which was Sienna. So I wanted I get why they didn't have it an hour and a half of just Sienna and Art, but I did enjoy that. That's like my favorite element of this movie is like that Sienna Art tug and pull. I love that they have that dynamic where they're really opposites of each other, and that was my favorite. That scene in the house where they have Sienna tied up and they're just flat out torturing her. I mean, that was some gruesome stuff, and like the mental fuckery they do there with like first it's her aunt, like here's Gabby's skull and the aunt's
Yeah,
mine, and then she's like, oh no, it's Jonathan. Here's his glasses. I'm just like they are just like, and that has nothing to do with them like stabbing or dismembering. They're just full on mentally fucking with her,
mental.
which
Hmm.
that was a little different. Like that's a little different than what we've seen in the other Terrifier movies.
And I think that was why the importance of having a character that can speak was so like necessary in this specific movie in that exchange, because like otherwise Art is just there for the violence. Like he can't possibly explain that. So Vicky was essential.
Yeah,
And I really loved that sequence in particular, because I think so often now it's I don't want to, I'm not really bagging on Marvel movies. I'm just saying in the Marvelification of cinema, like bad guys just sort of get beat in the last moment. Like there's no
Hmm.
real like back and forth, or like wow, like look how much the bad guy's winning. Essentially, Art wins at the end of
Hmm.
Terrifier 3. If you really think about it, they don't
Yeah.
actually get Sienna, but like they take as much as they possibly can for her and leave her completely susceptible to the idea of kind of becoming his herald, like becoming his new Vicky. Like now I've taken everything possible that we know of that could possibly be true. It could possibly
Hmm.
not be true. But now I've taken everything from you. And so you are so susceptible to becoming my acolyte, my herald, whatever it could be. And I'm like, finally, like a movie will do that. A movie can actually just go, what if the bad guy is so powerful that the strongest warrior against him kind of lost? Which is,
Hmm.
I guess that's back to another Marvel reference, like the Thanos in the end, in Infinity War or whatever. But like, I've kind of been waiting for that because it just feels like bad guys have been just they get swept under the corner, yeah, or under the rug like super fast. Not this time out. Like Art is as bad as you think he is, maybe worse.
Yeah. It's not easy.
and I don't know.
Shouldn't
I
be
may have
easy.
said this. I may have said this on our Terrifier review from last year, but I said that it's so ingrained in me in like being a slasher fan. You know, Nightmare on Elm Street and Scream are my two favorite franchises. What we all get conditioned to with those franchises is eventually the bad guy, the slasher dies. The slasher loses. The final girl finds a way to defeat him. And at the end of the Terrifier 1, even I was like, oh, okay, she's gonna come back and get Art. And then she doesn't, and I'm like, hold on now. This isn't how things are supposed to go.
Yeah.
And so the fact that Damien Leone kind of keeps flipping the script a little bit, like even after Art gets beheaded in Terrifier 2, he comes back and as Patrick said, like essentially he won. I mean, yes, he didn't get Sienna, but he chucked her niece into the pit of hell. She lost her sword. Her sword is with Gabby in the pit of hell.
In hell.
And and the aunt's dead, her uncle's dead. You know, we think we'll talk about that in a second. Is Jonathan dead? But they do all this kind of stuff, and again, they're just basically trying to break her and say you have nothing left. We've already taken your mom, we've taken all your friends, now we've taken these people. Like they're literally just trying to break her. But again, I'm conditioned, I think, like most slasher fans, to think Art's going to lose, and he doesn't. Again, like he kind of, because he lost Vicky, but he still gets on a bus and walks away at the end of the night. And we know, like, this isn't even like Terrifier 2 where he gets beheaded. Like, we know he's coming back because he
Hmm.
full on just walked out of the building.
Yep.
So now, listen, we all love Terrifier. I think it's been well documented. We all love Terrifier, but there's always some criticisms of a movie, and this is our section we call "It's Giving Part 5." This is a joke section. Patrick, would you like to explain what "It's Giving Part 5" is?
Sid, yet another new category. It's giving part five. Admittedly, part five of a lot of our franchises tends to kind of be a little funky. You know, Friday the
Hmm.
13th, A New Beginning, Freddy's, or what is it, Dream Child. You know, like things get weird at part fives. So this is just a little section where we kind of do some bullet points on things that might not have worked in this particular movie.
Hmm. God, I hate
I
to be
know
this
this is hard
person.
for you.
It is, because I am such a fucking Terrifier stan. Like I really am having a hard time like identifying something negative, because honestly, this was my favorite one of the whole franchise. I can honestly say that. I guess really the only thing that I would say is I would kind of agree with Damon in that like I wanted more Sienna versus Art action. Like, I think the fight at the end could have been a bit longer because I feel like she was strapped to the chair for most of the time. And then by the time she actually finally frees herself, the fight is only like a few minutes long and it's a good ass fight. But I definitely could have used more of that. However, I understand what they did because I think a lot of stuff in this movie is a lead up to Terrifier 4. And I think that one's where we're going to get like the ultimate showdown. So it was almost like purposely just giving us a taste in this one for what's to come, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. And again, I think it's credit to Damon Leone and also Lauren Lavera for creating a character that we actually care about that much, right? Because no offense to Vicky, and I'm forgetting the other character's name from Terrifier 1, but like we didn't really care about them that much. Like Art was just dissecting them, and they were like, okay, cool. Like, oh, Hacksaw, okay, awesome. And Terrifier 2, like even Sienna's friends were kind of like, oh, you're gonna go pee outside? Okay, well, you're about to lose something out there. We can just see this coming. Like none of them kind of mattered, but we love Sienna, and I think to a certain extent we've kind of come to love Jonathan. So like that's the people we care about. The other people, it's like I know this sounds terrible, but I was absolutely rooting for that podcaster chick to get absolutely butchered. She was
same.
And now, to be fair, if I was good, here's the one like I guess I would say complaint, and it's not really a complaint, it's just more of like a plot thing. That podcaster subplot seemed a little unnecessary to me, only because like to me they could make her just a super fan, and the serial killer super fans that are out there of just like they're obsessed with Charles Manson or whoever. I think they could have done that without the full on like, do you want to do my pod? Because they did that. Do you want to do my podcast speech twice? Once with Jonathan and once with Sienna, and it just was like, did we really need that? Like, just make her a super fan. Like, she doesn't need like have a true crime. I get what he's doing because true crime podcasts are so huge right now, and like, they're almost a little off-putting, like how obsessed people are with true crime. But like, I was like, make her a super fan and just have her like, fetishize Sienna and Jonathan. Like, oh, you went one-on-one with Art the Clown. What was that like? And they're like, hold on now. He almost fucking butchered me. He killed our mom, like killed all our friends. Like, it's not fucking fun for me to talk about this. Like, I'm not looking to like have a sit down with candles and have a conversation about this. So I think like that's, if I had a complaint about the plot, that's it. Just like make her a super fan. She doesn't necessarily need to be pushing for this podcast, because that ate up a lot of time in those interactions where I'm like, just give me Jonathan, just give me Sienna. I don't need to hear about this true crime podcast.
Yeah, I can't stand this girl. And I feel like they purposely did that to make us hate her so that we would be rooting for Art the Clown and be like, wait, am I rooting for Art the Clown right now?
Yeah.
I think we all were. I really do. But I do have to echo Damon. My biggest giving part 5 was that for a movie that is a half hour shorter than Terrifier 2, I still saw like 30 minutes that could have been cut. And now Damien has come out and said like it was a longer movie. I cut certain things based on what my producers thought I should cut. And so I cut these things out and save these other things. And that podcast subplot, when you really think about it, ultimately led to not much. Now, you're the real Terrifier historian here, so correct me if I'm wrong. But when I think about all the buildup of that podcaster and how annoying she was and how irritating she was, I did not feel like at the end of like when she was finally taken out, that it was something that really pushed the story forward. So I was like, wow, like we could have lost that entire subplot, kind of done it the way Damon was, which is like the annoying college friend who was there to just, be annoying and be fodder for Art. But that drawn out storyline that took up probably about 15-20 minutes of the movie didn't ultimately like lead to anything. It just led to her death. And I was like, you really could have cut that out. And then I was clocking the movie. And to me, Sienna's story really doesn't kick off until she shows up at Jonathan's college. Like once she's there, all of a sudden, and that's an hour into the movie. Once she finally actually comes to the college with him. And I was like, man, here's the story like I kind of showed up for. So I'm like, this movie really needed to like pare down the other stories and really like kind of focus on Sienna, Jonathan, and then her family, which, her niece was like this brand new thing. I didn't know she had a sister. I didn't know she had a niece. These were things like and they did a pretty good job focusing on that family. But that podcast story, I'm like, I needed more Sienna. I loved the scene in the bar. It was 15 minutes long. I could have used less of that scene and more of Sienna. Like that's my big criticism of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
That's fair.
and I think, in my opinion, and this is, I'm sure Damien Leone certainly doesn't need my defense when I say this, my excuse when I say this. I think he's always trying to find a balancing act for his story versus like the creative art kills, right? Because that's what people have come to expect in Terrifier. We're gonna get these gruesome, super ultra gory kills, and so like he's got to continue to up the ante. So like using liquid nitrogen in this movie, like that's something totally new, and that was like, where did this come from? And I saw an interview with him,
Jason X, that's where it came from.
I
Yes.
saw an interview with him where he talked about like he was at a film festival and he's like jotting down ideas of like these kills he wants to put in the movie, and I'm just like, imagine if he dropped that pad at a bar and some girl picked it up and like, hey, what? Oh my god, like
Jail.
but like I honestly I think that's the balancing act that he's trying to strike, is like giving you the really cool brutal art kills but then still giving you stories. I think it's just like, I think it's a filmmaker balancing act where it's like, how do I take away from one to give you another? And it's been well documented on this show, like I'm a story guy. I love story, I love the plot, I love the dialogue. So yeah, you're gonna play to me for more Sienna stuff, but is the mass audience that just spent, I think now it's over $21 million on opening weekend for the holiday weekend, like is the mass audience going to care more about that, or do they care more about the fucking chainsaw in the shower and liquid nitrogen in the hand? So I get it. Like this is me saying this, but I think that's Damien Leone's like, but I know people want the cool art kills, so I got to put more of that in there.
And he's never going to please everybody.
You're right, Sydney. It's really hard because he has two kind of fan bases. One who's like in love with the story, and one who's like, I'm just here for the gore. Like, and I'm curious. I'm going to give you this little anecdote from my movie going experience. You got to see it at Fantastic Fest, so like I'd love to hear about that a little bit more.
Yeah.
But at my movie going experience, people were leaving in like packs of 10 after a kill, but they would come back. They were just going on pee breaks. They did not give a fuck about the story. Like it was literally like, what is Art doing? Okay, he did it. Cool. They all get up and the same people would come back. They'd go like get a drink or whatever. And like they did this like throughout the entire movie. I'm curious. I mean, obviously I think the Fantastic Fest crowd is a film festival crowd's totally different. That's like everyone's there to party for that movie. But I'm just curious what your like experience was with the crowds with regards to like kills versus story.
So most people I feel like who were at Fantastic Fest were at Fantastic Fest for Terrifier 3. Like that was like the opening night, like big movie, and the whole cast, the whole crew was there. So from what I saw and like from what I experienced, like everybody in that theater was an Art the Clown fan. And that was a really cool experience because you don't get that in like a regular like casual moviegoer theater, but like everybody was there for Art the Clown, and like I feel like nobody moved from their fucking seat. I don't think. Like I was like glued to that shit. I was like, I'm not moving. I will fucking piss my pants right here if I have to. I am not leaving this seat. Like I don't care. And I feel like everybody kind of felt the same. And that made the crowd really fun because we like laughed together. We like gasped together. Like everybody was kind of one watching it. So yeah, everybody there was an Art fan and was there for Art, and I think was going to leave that theater satisfied.
Yeah, did you get to see it with just a regular movie going crowd as well? Did you go back to the theaters a second time?
Yeah, so I saw it again last night, and it really wasn't that busy. Like I'm sure like Friday, Saturday night were a bit busier. But this crowd, it was a smaller crowd, but a lot of people were very engaged, especially with the kills. So I think people do definitely go, like, again, like the casual crowds do go for that because they just want to see Art the Clown, like kill a bunch of people. I didn't see anybody get up and leave though. Terrifier 2, I saw people get up and straight up leave the theater. I did not see that this time.
I had two people. So I was originally going to a theater that was basically sold out on Friday night or on Thursday night, And I was like, I don't mind being around a lot of people, but I was like, if I could not have people on every side of me, it's a little, I'm just like that kind of way. So I looked at
Yep.
another theater and went to a little later show, and it was still crowded, but I had a little buffer space. But it was still crowded. But I actually did have two people after the initial opening where where he kills the family, and then right after they kill the guards, and Vicky has her moment with the glass. This couple just got up and left, and they never came back. And I was like, I know this sounds terrible to say this, but in my head, I was like celebrating. I was like, I finally got one. I got the crowd that didn't want to be here for Terrifier, because you hear all these marketing stories like people are vomiting and they're leaving, and I'm like, is this real? I actually experienced it. I saw two people see that scene, and they're like, yeah, we're out, and they just left.
Yeah, that's how I felt when I saw Terrifier 2 opening night. And I saw probably like 3 to 4 people leave the theater at different times, like different groups of people. And I was like, holy shit, I always hear about this. And it's like one of those things, it's like an urban legend. Like you never actually see it happen. People say it happens. And I'm like, I am witnessing it happen. Like people are getting up and leaving. This is incredible.
Yeah. So to that point, Sid, listen, let's be honest. We're all going to have the same answer here, which is why this category exists. The hardest scene to watch in Terrifier 3. Now, the reason why this is a brainchild of my fantastic co-host, Patrick Guerra, why this is in here, because we have best kill and best gore coming up in a moment. But there's a reason why this category is in here, because you know what I'm talking about, Sid. Patrick, what is the hardest, so I'll give it to you. What is the hardest scene to watch in Terror? Like the one that even got us, horror fans, like horror fanatics, this one got all of us.
Oh God, I'm scared I'm going to say the wrong answer, but I'm thinking the Vicky with the glass scene.
Yes, that's 100%.
Oh, thank God. I was like, God, everybody feels the same about this, right? That shit had me cringing. And I saw this at Fantastic Fest. I was very lucky for this experience with a bunch of horror talk people. So this is literally what we do. We love this shit. We love the brutal shit. We love the disturbing shit. You look down the line of us, everybody's like jaws to the ground, hiding, screaming, cringing. We were all so fucked up from that scene.
I wonder if Damien, because I met Damien Leone, incredibly nice guy, and we talked a little bit about Terrifier 3, but obviously he couldn't tell me much. But I wonder if, because he goes to a lot of horror conventions and he meets a lot of hardcore horror fans, where the people like us, we're not cringing. We're watching the chainsaw scene going, fuck yes, Art, get up.
Laughing.
Even the bedroom scene in part 2, we're like, oh my God, that's brutal, but so awesome. I wonder if he stuck that in there thinking, you know what? I'm going to get these fuckers. I'm going to get the horror community with this scene, and they're all going to cringe. I wonder if that was stuck in specifically for us desensitized weirdos that just love this. And he's like, I'll get you too. And he got all of us.
I feel like that could be the only reason why. Why else is this here? Please. I think about that. I've been thinking about it every day since I saw this movie. It's fucked.
And it's mostly implied. That's what's kind of wild, is this is the franchise of we go hard, we show you everything. And even Damien Leone was like, no, we can't do this. We can't show you this. This is how hardcore this is. This is how far this goes. And it was really shocking. And I'm sitting there with my wife, who has seen the Terrifier movies. She's a very seasoned horror person. And she was just like, oh, what?
That is so true, though, that your mind kind of fills in the blanks because you really don't see anything, but you don't need to.
No.
I don't need to describe it, but I'll tell you, when it started, I was like, is this? And then the blood started dripping, and I was like, no. And again, I know you love this film too, Sid. I love Martyrs, but I've said Martyrs is a film that I've seen once, and I'm like, you know what? It's an incredible film. I recommend it, but I don't necessarily need to see it. It is so fucking brutal. I'm just like, God, this is just, it's hard to watch the torture scenes in that movie. But I love it. that one was like the first time in a long time I've been uncomfortable watching a scene where I'm like,
Yeah.
oh God, like this is, I was like twisting in my seat and I'm just like, this is a lot right now. So kudos, David Leone. For the first time in a long time, you got a lot of us to be like, oh, Jesus Christ. So yeah, that was the scene. I thought you'd get it, but I was like, yeah, that is the one. That's the one with even all of us were like, no, not that.
Yeah. I think the whole Terrifier fandom feels that way right about now. We're all like, okay, we got. Like, he got us.
Now, our next category, which I mentioned already, is best kill / best gore. And that's a huge part of why we go to Terrifier movies. That's what Damien Leone has built his house upon. The foundation is these Art the Clown kills and the gore. And to his credit, which you'd think after watching Terrifier 2, how is he going to up the ante? Boy, does he up the ante in this movie. So, Sid, I'll turn it to you. Do you have a favorite kill or a favorite gore from Terrifier 3?
I think the kill is the shower scene. I think that's the kill. That's like this movie's version of the bedroom scene, because you are not like, you're not expecting to see a man's like whole genitalia in a horror movie, period. In a movie, really, in general, like female nudity is like so common, but like male nudity, not so much. So just seeing that in general is shocking. But then to see it from like the angle that the camera's at and just be completely split apart and it all like falls out and it's like smoking. And then on top of it, Art gets down and does a snow angel in his blood. Like, that is the cherry on fucking top.
Absolutely, and the I call it the shower chainsaw massacre myself. Like that's definitely my best kill / gore, because another thing is like there's a lot of like little homages in this movie. We mentioned the Jason X one. Like there's no way like he didn't freeze the guy's face and rip it off as a little bit of a nod to Jason X. Of course he does. Like I know Damien Leone loves the Friday the 13th franchise. Like that's obvious. Also, I think we all love the Texas Chainsaw Massacre in some capacity, somewhere, somehow. And to see Art wielding a chainsaw, like I was just genuinely hyped the fuck up because I was like, hell yeah! Like since 1974, the idea of a masked killer with the chainsaw coming at you is just fucking rad. And now I'm seeing Art do it, and the chain starts going. And he attacks them inside the shower and he's chopping her in half. And then you're like, oh, this is super brutal. What's going to happen to the guy? And the guy's like laying prone on the ground. And here comes that chainsaw right up Main Street. And it's just going at him. And then they're like, okay, now cut to the camera part where we're right at the twig and berries as it's getting destroyed by a chainsaw. You've never seen that in any chainsaw massacre movie. Like you rarely even see the chainsaw do its damage. And he was like, no, we're going to show it all here. We're going to show you how messy this can get.
That's so true.
It's hardcore. It's hardcore. Now, to be fair, you're both right in the sense of this was the bedroom scene from Terrifier 2. This is Damien Leone's masterpiece. This is him painting his masterpiece in Terrifier 3 is that shower scene. But for me, and I'm so glad you mentioned earlier, Sid, because this was my favorite. And also, kudos to the most creative kill, which is why I loved it, is the scene with the ant. Jamming a tube down her throat and then stuffing rats in, lighting on fire so they try to gnaw down into her throat, and then they slit her throat and the rats come back out again. I just like I want to talk to Damon. I want to meet Damien Leone's parents and be like, "What did you do to this kid? Like, what the fuck?" Because that is like next level. Like I'm not insulting the chainsaw scene, but like we think of a chainsaw in a horror movie, okay, and even as graphic and as nasty as going straight up the twig and berries as Patrick called it, that's pretty gruesome, right? But who thinks of stuffing a tube in someone's mouth, shoving rats in with a blowtorch so they gnaw their way down into the body, and then slitting the throat so they run back out again? Who the fuck? Like, Damien Leone, like, I'm not saying you need therapy, but you probably should talk to somebody, because that is
Are you well?
That is a whole other level of creativity to kill someone. I was like, holy shit.
You good?
Yeah. You good, bro? Like, I agree that one definitely gets the award for the most creative kill for sure. Because like we've seen like, like in Sinister, and that's like an old like torture technique, like the rats under the bucket and they chew through the stomach. But this was like such a different take on it. And you're like, wow, they really took it to just a whole nother fucking level. Like just the pipe going in her mouth and like the hammer, like hammering it down, that's bad enough. Like just let her die that way.
Oh my God. I and that was, I think that to me was even more brutal, was just the hammering of that thick pipe. I mean, it was so big, it was like oversized. So it's like
Her
ripping her
mouth's
jaw apart.
ripping. Yeah.
Oh my God. Like I love, and that I really appreciate about this series. He's like, no, we have to like show all the brutality of it, all of how it like it shouldn't even work. And so we're going to show how messy it is. And I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, this is like properly fucked up.
What I also love about this, and just to be honest, because again, I think we're all slasher fans. Ghostface is not supernatural, so Ghostface is just about like it's a little bit more of mental fuckery with you and then killing you in the Scream movies. You could argue that's also Freddy Krueger. He's kind of like mentally fucking with you in your dreams and wants to torture you a little bit before he kills you. Jason is just this big hulking brute who tries to. It's brutal, but it's usually pretty fast. Like he's not
Hmm.
dissecting you. He's just putting a hatchet through your head or putting a weed eater up your ass or whatever he does. Like it's not. It's pretty quick. Art literally tortures you. Like Art wants to, like he embraces the torture, and so it makes
Yeah.
these scenes much more drawn out and brutal. And I think that's what separates Terrifier from every other horror slasher franchise. Is he's just not there to kill you. He is there to torture you and then kill you.
And enjoy it and laugh the whole time. Like he's getting a fucking kick out of it.
Was this not? We talked about this a little bit in our non-spoiler section. Was this not the funniest Terrifier movie? Like there were legitimately moments where I was the scene that got me the most, and I was literally laughing in the theater, and probably everyone around me is like, "What the fuck is wrong with this guy?" Was the scene where he was eavesdropping on the podcaster and her boyfriend, and
Yes.
he goes, "Oh, you see Art the Clown, you'd fucking wouldn't you?" And Art smiles, and she's like, "No, I wouldn't." He goes,
He
"I died laughing when he did that."
Yeah. So that's my favorite thing about this movie is I feel like Art has more personality than he ever has before. And I feel like so much of that is like David being free to like almost improvise at this point. Like he's comfortable with the character because there's no way this was like written into the script. Like I feel like that was just him having these genuine reactions. And I loved that scene. But my favorite scene in this whole movie was at the end when Sienna's tied up and every time he walks by, he just like slaps her on the back of the head. Just cuz.
Oh, I fucking love that. It made me laugh. So I was giggling, and everybody, like,
Yeah.
clearly everybody is like spent at this point because what hell he's brought, and I was just like, look at it. He keeps smacking her on the head. It's hilarious. Like there was like a sibling rivalry to that.
Yes. Yeah.
So, real quick, before we get to our predictions and theories, and then where we're going in Terrifier 4, I want to ask the group a question, and I think I know the answer, but I want to see. So, towards the end of Terrifier 3, of course, as they're torturing Sienna, they have this skull. And initially they say it's Gabby, and then we find out it's not Gabby. And then they say it's Jonathan to put the glasses on, which is a pretty classic way of telling Sienna they killed her brother. Now, we do know that they were at his college because they got the uncle who was there to pick him up. But do we actually believe that Jonathan is dead? So, Sid, is Jonathan dead, or is this like Art fucking with Sienna and he's actually still alive?
Hard no for me. I think the whole point of that was to like further break Sienna's spirit to try to possess her. And mainly because like I think Damian Leone knows better than to kill off a main character off screen. Like I don't think he would fucking disrespect Jonathan like that and like the fan base. So I don't think it's Jonathan. I think he did send Jonathan to hell though. So I think when Sienna goes to get Gabby, she's going to find Jonathan there as well.
I
That's
like that.
interesting. I wonder how does he send people to hell? Does
That's a
or
great
I guess we'll
question.
find out, and I guess we'll find out in the
Yeah.
next installment. But
I
yeah,
mean,
I'm
shit,
with
in
you.
this one, the floor literally opened up and just like sucked her right in. So,
Right, like it's kind of like the infection of her being his herald or whatever, like is like some sort of evil in itself, like she's like
yeah.
covered in his evil, I guess. But yeah, I'm with you. Like, there's no way. that Jonathan gets killed off screen unceremoniously. I really don't see how that can happen. And now, and Damien again taking notes, going, "Oh shit, okay, they didn't like that. Got it. Okay, I do have to kill him on screen in part 4. Sorry, Jonathan, you've got to come back."
Or I think like even if he is dead, like we would at least get a flashback of it in part 4.
Something.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's true.
I just like Damien speaks so highly of Elliot Fulham, who plays that part. Like Elliot is the reason why we got the time jump. Like this movie was going to take place. The last one, Terrifier 2, took place on Halloween. His idea was to just start this one that Christmas, 2 months later. But because Elliot Fulham grew up so much, he's like, this just wouldn't make sense because he looks like he's a foot taller and everything. He's like, so I have to age him. So he did a 5-year time jump specifically for Elliot Fulham when he could have written him out. He could have done a million things to just not have him in the second movie or in the third movie. But obviously he loves that guy and he loves the character.
Yeah.
So I can't believe that's how he goes out. I think he survived, he ran, he got away somehow, but they're trying to torture and fuck with Sienna, and so saying that he's dead is the best possible way to do that. So I don't think he's dead. I do like your theory that he said, hell, I like that. It's like a twist to go down to find Gabby and you also find Jonathan and he's actually alive, or you can bring him back to life. So I think that would be an interesting twist. So with that being said, as before we get fully into like what we want to see in Terrifier 4, this is also kind of like what we want to see in Terrifier 4. I'm not gonna make you repeat yourself. If you don't follow Sid over on her TikTok on Horror Chronicles, do yourself a favor. I know our podcast, again, not everyone's a TikTok user, but go watch her theory on what this all means, the whole connection to religious themes and where this all connects to God and Satan, things like that. It's a really brilliant exposition. I watched it and I left a comment because I was like, I think I think my theory is very similar, but I'll throw you mine real quick. And then we kind of discuss and we'll kind of see what we're going with Terrifier 4. So here's my theory. I think you're on the right track. I don't know that I would define them as God and Satan necessarily, but I do think it's demon and angel, obviously. I think that's pretty stated. But here's my theory. We got flashbacks with Sienna's father in this movie, the great Jason Patrick, of course, Michael from Lost Boys, which was awesome. What a great pull getting him in this movie. Yeah. I think because we see that scene where he draws the angel character and he hands it to Sienna and he has that shocking moment where he has like the flashes. I think in my head, and I said this to you on the Terrifier podcast, I thought they were setting it up for her dad to be Art the Clown. My thought was, yes, it's demon, it's angel, all those things are absolutely correct. But my theory is that her father knew he was possessed, knew this was going wrong inside of him, knew something was off. And so he created this sword and he created this character for his daughter because he knew eventually he would turn into this killer demon, whatever you want to call it, Art the Clown, because he was drawing art before art existed. We saw that from the sketchbooks that Jonathan had in the last movie. So I think her dad knew his fate was going to be becoming this demon. And so he gave his daughter the only weapon that could kill him because that was the only way he could protect her from him, because he knew if she didn't have this, he would mow through her and her entire family and there would be no way to stop him. So I think this was her dad's, his way of basically being like, here's my only way to protect you. I'm going to give you this sword. I'm going to give you this weapon. So when I do become this demon, you have a way to stop me. So I think everything else you said to that point of like angel versus demon, and this is like the ultimate evil versus the ultimate good, I think that's all absolutely right. My only twist to that is I still think Art is her dad, and that was his way of protecting her, of saying like, here's this one thing that can stop me. And I know that once I become Art, there's none of me's in there anymore. It's like Anakin Skywalker is dead. I am Darth Vader now. I think that's what he saw coming. And so he gave her the one weapon that could stop him. That's my theory.
I was so behind the Art being Sienna's dad theory in Terrifier 2. Like I thought that was like the only explanation, but now seeing 3 and getting all this new information and like kind of developing this other theory, I feel like it's more so like he's a prophet. Like he was sent down as a prophet and that's why he has these visions. And that's why he was able to see like like make the drawings of Art the Clown and his murders before they actually happen. Not because I necessarily think he is him, but because I think he was able to see what he was going to do. And this kind of the whole point that I made in my TikTok, but I think Sienna is the second coming of Christ. And that means like her father represents God. So he knew that one day he was going to have to sacrifice his daughter to save the world and to like save the world from this evil. And that's why he made her this armor, because he prophesized it. He could see it coming. So he was doing that in advance to help her. And like, all of the imagery in this movie, for me at least, pointed towards Sienna being Jesus Christ. Like, especially the biggest one is the crown of thorns that she literally wears during the whole battle between her and Art at the end. And then like her being lashed, which is the vision that her father sees when he grabs that picture, like Jesus being lashed before being crucified. I'm saying this all as like a former Catholic school student too. Like that's not religious at all anymore, but like shit, I remember, you know? So like I'm kind of putting the dots together. And then Vicky said something that I didn't even catch until my second viewing, which like I highly recommend watching this a second time for people who can handle it, because like the second time you're not as focused on the gore and you can pick up on the little details, because Vicky says to Sienna, "You're strong. I see why they chose you." And I think what's meant by that is like they chose her to be the second coming. And like those wounds on her hands are like symbolic of like Jesus's crucifixion wounds. And that's why they heal the way that they do. So with that being said, like the way that Jesus descends into hell before being crucified, I think Sienna's going to descend into hell. We kind of have already confirmed that, like Damien's confirmed that. And I think Sienna's going to die in the final movie, because I think Terrifier 4 is going to be the final movie. And I think Sienna's going to die because I think she's going to sacrifice herself to literally save the world from evil and from Art the Clown and his like demon spawns.
But like a good Catholic, what happens after Jesus dies? They resurrect.
She resurrects. Yeah, that's true.
I think I rock with what you're saying, like symbolically. I'm like, I think that makes sense, like symbolically. I just wonder if it's not too much to write into a final movie to wrap up. I mean, I think, and we're going to talk about this in a moment, I think like he's going to have to get succinct at some point. No more podcasters, no more like Santa Claus scenes. Like you're going to have to eventually just start to like tell this story. And especially if it's as in depth as what you're proposing. The reason why I might rock a little bit more with like on the surface, it's like either her dad Michael is Art, or he is like he's part of something that Art is, like so, like he's part of that whole thing. It's like why they chose you. It's like, okay, there's a good and an evil. I think like it's going to be really hard to fit that as a writer into one movie. It's going to be super, super hard to put it in one movie and make it all make sense and not feel rushed. But there's definitely a pathway for your theory if he just jettisons all side stuff, which I haven't seen from him yet. Right now, what I'm seeing from him, and even from hearing his interviews, is like he wants to put everything into these movies, like so much. He wants the movies to be 3 hours long. He wants to have tons and tons of story in there. So it's like, okay, but you should, you know, if we're gonna wrap this story up, like time to focus, because we got a lot of ground to cover. I mean, what you're talking about there was written like, you know, it took a long time to write those books.
Yeah.
And so it's like, yeah, like trying to fit it all in. Like, we'll see if he can do it. I think either way, and I think based off of coming from 2 to 3, he's going to surprise us yet again. Because this is classic, like, we're all super invested. This is like True Detective season 1. This is Marvel movies, DC movies, where everybody's trying to figure out the end game. And he's like, I have the end game, and you guys are like way off the path. I'm hoping actually that's what comes to be, is just like, you didn't see what I had coming. Like that will actually be the most exciting one. But all these theories are fun, and we get to like spend at least another year theorizing about what's going on, maybe even a year and a half to 2 years.
Oh yeah. And you know, soon enough, like especially when it becomes available like on digital, like everybody on Reddit is going to be up with like screenshots and all this shit with deep dives and whatnot. Probably myself included, to be honest. But
I hope so, Sid, because I live for the content that you're putting out there.
I think, you know, it's funny, like my version of Art of Sienna's dad becoming Art and your version of Sienna sacrificing herself, I think we're both teetering towards the like sad ending. You know what I mean? Like it's not gonna
Yeah.
be like Art's gonna get vanquished, but Sienna is again. I think you're absolutely onto something with the whole sacrificing herself, especially if we find out that Jonathan is also in hell, because we know Gabby's there, we know Gabby's down there, but if Jonathan's also there, I think that is ultimately like she's gonna have to sacrifice herself to save them. And that's like what's most important to her, saving Jonathan and Gabby. I think that could absolutely be there. Or again, even if it's my theory, which is her dad is Art, she has to kill her own father to kill Art the clown. That is also a very dark ending. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I think like either way, it sounds terrible. I don't think either one of us are giving Sienna a happy ending here.
No, and either way, we're going to be fucked up again somehow.
Yeah. Now, so my last thing on this, when we talk about like the fourth movie, we pretty much already kind of talked about what we want there. Like, can we strike the balancing? Because again, I love the story and I love the kills, but like Damien has said, one, maybe two movies. He's kind of hinted already it may dip into a fifth. That's where I got my theory about the dad things. I was like, maybe they're going to reveal Art is her dad at the end of the fourth movie, and then we got to go into the fifth to finish it. But you can tell Damien's not totally reserved to say one more movie. I think he's got in his head it could dip into two. So ultimately, like, can we strike a balance for this fourth movie? Like, are we okay getting into a fifth movie? I mean, are we really going to complain about more Art the Clown?
To be honest, Art, like this is a franchise where you could give me fucking 20 of them and I will watch every single one religiously and be very happy about it, because like Damien is one where, other franchises, like the people who originated the franchise and who started it kind of like drop off along the way. But Damien, I feel like this is his baby and he would never let anybody else touch it. So like as long as there's Art the Clown, Damien is going to be behind it and David is going to be behind it playing him. And as long as we have that combo, you could make fucking 50 of them. I'll be in the theater every single time. Don't care.
That's a perfect, like I was going to follow up with like, do you think, and I don't know, I've never heard Damien speak about this out loud, but do you think there's a world where he executive produces sequels? Because at some point he's going to want to move on as just a creative individual. Like that's why he's like, oh, 4 is the end, or maybe 5. Would you sign off as a Terrifier scholar? Would you sign off on a Damien Leone executive produced, by a hand-picked director, writer, like somebody who like has to pitch to the Don himself and say like, yeah, like this is my idea for this movie. He has to still oversee it and produce it, but are you cool with the idea of Terrifier 10 being directed by somebody else?
Honestly, as long as he's involved with some way, and I would say as long as he still is in charge of the practical effects, sign me up.
Yeah, he has to oversee, like he's like, this isn't gory enough. Like
Yeah.
I didn't see the guy's balls explode. Like what's going on
Yeah.
here,
Like,
guys?
what are you
Like
doing? This is
you
weak.
missed the opportunity there, folks. Shoot it again.
Yep.
I think,
Exactly.
and before we get to our last category, I think that is where, again, even if you're not like the hugest fan of Terrifier, which I think we can all tell that we all like Terrifier, but the one thing I appreciate about this franchise more than anything, as a devout, Nightmare on Elm Street fan, as a devout Scream fan, is that without the big studio involvement, Damien Leone still controls everything.
Yeah.
This isn't Sony saying, hold on now, we don't want to pay Nev Campbell, so now you got to write a movie without her. This
That's so true.
this isn't a studio saying, oh well, Robert Englund doesn't want to come back. Well, let's just remake it and put in this other guy and make a really god awful, terrible, fucking terrible remake. Like that. You know what I mean? Like they're not saying, well, we'll take it away from you, we're gonna make it our own, and we're just gonna throw somebody else behind the director's chair, somebody else in the writer, a new Art the Clown. Like Damien owns this. And this is his thing. And I think that's why, like, I don't want them to listen, they made $21 million opening weekend. They're going to have a bigger budget for Terrifier 4. We all know that.
Yeah.
But I don't want this to be Sony's Terrifier 4. I don't want this to be Paramount Pictures presents Terrifier 4. Let Damien Leone do his thing, because that to me is the authenticity of this film. I don't want it taken, because listen, Sean S. Cunningham created Friday the 13th and he moved on and did other things, and that just became a whole other thing far away from what he did. Wes Craven, of course, with Nightmare on Elm Street. I want this to stay Damon Leone's. I don't want anyone else involved, at least for now, because unfortunately we do get those bastard version of films down the road where it does become, hey, we just don't want to pay Nev Campbell, so we don't want to pay Lauren Lavera, so she's just not going to be in the next. Fuck you. Like, that's what I say to that. Like, fuck you.
Yeah, and I feel like the success that they've had this weekend is just proof to, like, not even just the fan base, but to them that they don't need this big studio backing. And I love it because it's almost like a big fuck you to, like, the Joker, same opening weekend, and it fucking blew that shit out of the water, like didn't even come close. So he doesn't need him. And I think now he definitely knows he doesn't need him. So I see him sticking with this for a while.
Now, I have to imagine everyone who's made it this far in the podcast has heard or listened or watched, has watched Terrifier 3, but on the off chance that you haven't, some weirdos just like to listen to us talk. So, the last category we do is, usually is it scary? Our last category today is it terrifying? What that category means is, does this fit as a Terrifier film? I think we all know the answer, but if anyone is on the fence or they saw Terrifier 2, should I go see Terrifier 3, or is this, because I think there was a
did they sell out?
Yeah, wait, there's a slight worry, like, they got money now, like, is this gonna be a different film? Is art not gonna be as extreme? So Sid, as again the Terrifier scholar, is this movie terrifying?
I think it's terrifying. I think Art is even though he's as funny as he's ever been in this movie, I think he's the scariest he's ever been too, because all of his kills in this movie are ramped up to 1,000. Like in Terrifier 2, we got that one bedroom scene, and that was like the scene. But now there's so many kills, and you're like, this is the kill. Oh, wait, I think this is the kill. Oh, wait, this is the kill, because they're all ramped up. So this is Art the Clown at his peak. They did not sell out. They took it and they fucking ran with it.
Yeah, all you edgelords out there who are like, #1 movie in America, whatever. Like, I don't watch mainstream movies. This is literally an extension of Terrifier 2. If you loved Terrifier 2 and you went to the movies to support it and to make it a huge success so they could make Terrifier 3, Damien Leone and company did not betray you. It is literally an extension of that movie. It feels completely from the same DNA. This is 100% a Terrifier.
Absolutely.
Has everyone on this podcast seen The Wolf of Wall Street at some point? I'm hoping maybe.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, at the end of the movie when Jordan Belfort's so addicted to drugs that he takes like the super lewd, like the one that's like the ultra, that to me is what Terrifier 3 is. Like Terrifier 2 is like full on like crazy wild insanity, and then he's just like, hold on now, there's a stronger lewd I can take to make Terrifier 3. Let's go. And so that to me is what Terrifier 3 is all about. This is Terrifier 2 times 10. This is Terrifier 2 on crack, whatever analogy you want to use. This is that. And I'll be honest, like I was like, how is he gonna top it? Stop doubting him. Just Damon, stop doubting him. He's gonna find a way to top it. This one does it. This is brutal. This is gory. And if you need, again, I mentioned it earlier, I'll reference again now. If you need any answer about how Hollywood is reacting to this, go look at the reactions to the box office. Every headline is like, what the fuck? How did this happen? How is this movie being so successful? Just read those headlines and know that that's the studio heads being like, what do we do? What are we missing here? We put Lady Gaga on a movie. How did this not work? So yeah, I think that's pretty clearly stated. Yeah, so Terrifier 3 in theaters right now. Definitely worth your time. Go check it out. Sid, we said at the Terrifier review, you got to come back for Terrifier 3, so you do know
Absolutely.
Terrifier 4, like you got to come back again, right? Like,
oh, I'm in. Even if there's 50 Terrifiers, you guys are stuck with me because we have to do this now for the rest of our lives, for everyone.
I'm way in on that. 100% in on that.
Amazing.
That is it. Now, make sure you, of course, if you are on TikTok, follow Sid at Horror Chronicles. It is, I mean, no offense, but it is my favorite horror creator channel. I've loved it since I discovered it.
Stop.
Continue to support her over there. And also the Hello Sydney podcast. When we first talked to you, when you did your show, I think you were like a few episodes in. Now you're like real deep into it. You had a lot of episodes since then.
Yeah, it's been almost a year since I started. So yeah, it's official. I'm really getting in on it. I'm like doing a whole Halloween theme right now. So I've been like knee deep in the Halloween movies. It's crazy.
And for those that are like, I don't do TikTok, because I'm sure our audience skews a little older. Horror Chronicles is also on Instagram, which I know you have, and it's all the same content. It's all the same great stuff that made us fall in love with Sid and everything that she does. So be sure to check her out. TikTok, Instagram, the Hello Sydney podcast. All these things win.
Wow. Thanks, guys.
And obviously, we appreciate everyone that tunes into our show. As always, make sure you check us out on all your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and over on the website, which is now launched, rewindofthelivingdead.com. And of course, you can subscribe to us on YouTube as well. Just search Rewind of the Living Dead. We'll be back next week, because next week's another horror release. We're going to do Smile 2 next week. Are you a Smile fan, Sid? Were you a fan of the original Smile?
I liked Smile, and I'm actually really looking forward to Smile 2 because I feel like it's going to be ramped up now because of the whole like pop star. So it's a big reach, and I'm very excited for it.
Yeah, that was Patrick's favorite horror movie of 2022. So I think we're all kind of
Yeah.
excited for Smile 2. So that is coming next week. But as always, want to say a big thank you to everyone that tunes in the show each and every week. If you want to follow us on social media beyond our social media channels, which you can search Rewind of the Living Dead on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, you can follow me at Damon Martin. And Patrick, you are?
At Director Patrick.
And a big thank you, as always, for everyone that tunes in. A big thank you again to Sid for joining us this week. And we will be back next week with another edition of Rewind of the Living Dead. Thanks for tuning in. We will see you then.
Peace.
Hey.